Welcome in Libeline. I'm hosting a new guest today, Michael Sartori, who is a YouTuber. And Michael picked today Bob Dylan's song, My Back Pages. Mike, why did you pick that song?
I often don't think about the lyrics too much when I listen to music. Um, I've been playing guitar since I was like 12, so the instrumentation is usually more of like what makes something stand out for me. But I guess I actually think Bob Dylan's a terrible singer. Um, so, but his lyrics are what he's famous for, and so I remember the first time I heard this song and the refrain in it. It's just such a simple phrase that is kind of flipped from like what something that you might say all the time normally. He just kind of switches it, and it makes you think about everything in a totally different way. So, and I think it has a lot of it's just a very humble message and kind of a story of repentance, I guess you could say, changing your mind and going in a different direction. So,
Yeah, I love that song. It's the poetry
mhm.
that kind of gets me in a sense. Well, would you do the honors read the first part?
Okay. Crimson flames tied through my ears, rolling high in mighty traps. Pounced with fire on flaming roads, using ideas as my maps. We'll meet on edges soon, said I, proud neath heated brow. Ah, but I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now.
That stood out to me. I was so much older then. I'm younger
Hmm.
than that now.
That's the part that kind of got me hooked on it.
Yeah. Our wisdom is growing into a more innocent and simple way of seeing the world.
Hmm.
Is that what we grow to? What do you read into those lines?
Um, well, in that little refrain there, I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now. It just makes me think that, as we kind of go through life, we always have a little image in our head of how we think the world works, and then something comes and smashes that image, and uh, the humbling experience is like to become like a child because you realize, oh, there's just so much more to the world than I understand. Instead of just keep trying to make your little model work and just because then you just keep discarding all the new things, or you just say that was just a coincidence, or that was just an outlier. But if you're humble about it, you realize in you know less and less as you learn how much there is to know about the world and everything in it.
I agree with that. I was headstrong, this maximalistic way of thinking when I was younger. And then I was
Hmm.
like, oh, the world doesn't work this way. And I cannot make the world bow to my will, in a sense.
Yeah.
What does it mean, crimson flames?
I I don't know. I was thinking maybe it's like the thought that came to my mind was like you ever see like a cartoon where like the creature gets like really angry and like steam shoots out his ears or,
Oh,
or something. I don't know. That's what I was thinking about. Maybe it was something like that. Or just like if your face turns red or something. Um, you know. I mean, I don't know, because when he talks about like pounced with fire on flaming roads too, like I don't know, he's kind of talking about like fire and flames as like his ideas, maybe. He says using ideas as my maps. That one stuck out a little bit to me because that I thought of like ideas are like hypotheticals. It's not, instead of like you should have experience as your map, or like Jordan Peterson have a map of meaning. ideas are just like, you think you know how everything's going to work out. That's your guide. You know, it might not. It's not. It's untested. But yeah, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure exactly what he thought of when he said the crimson flame. So those are a couple of the thoughts that I had. Like either was something about his ideas or his emotions, or
It's like when he says tied through my ears. It's like the
yeah.
scream which is inside but also outside.
Hmm.
Like the way I'm envisioned it, it's like that fire that screams so loud that it gets outside somehow. Those ideas, like he's so passionate about something, he wants to scream about it. And
Yeah.
then we will meet on the edge soon. It's confusing, but it feels like language of emotion.
Hmm.
The poets do. Yeah. Heated brow. It's like, is that the brow that are angry? Like he's
Yeah, I
upset.
think so. I mean, I think that maybe that would kind of go with like, I was thinking like about, when your face turns red or whatever, like with the crimson flames. So yeah, meet on edges soon. That's a strange line. I wonder what the image that he had when he was thinking about that was.
I think all of that is about anger. Like the
Yeah.
whole first stanza is the anger. He can see it coming.
Mm.
It started inside, it grew outside, it went out through his ears
Yeah.
somehow. And then he knows he will be keep unwinding himself. So pretty soon he will be on the edge because he know how his anger will go. That's
Mm.
my projection though. Mm.
Yeah, I think it's good. Like high and mighty traps, that's thing like that's that when you feel like your anger or your emotions are justified, but you don't see where you're wrong. So it's a trap. It's a high and mighty thought, but there's a part that you're not aware of. So um
Self-righteousness.
yeah, I think you could say something like that.
Mm.
I think that's what people say. Someone's high and mighty when they are self-righteous or looking down on others.
Mhm. Forcing them to bow to their will or something. Yeah, I think we can go further. It might put it into
Okay.
context.
Half-wracked prejudice leapt forth. Rip down all hate, I screamed. Lies that life is black and white spoke from my skull, I dreamed. Romantic facts of musketeers, foundation deep somehow. Ah, but I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now.
Hmm. So half-wracked prejudice, what those would be from the high and mighty perspective? And I'm trying to imagine
Uh,
that type.
I mean, half-wracked just makes me think, they're not like fully thought out ideas. And um, you know, he kind of does. It does make the first verse a little bit make more sense, where he's saying, uh, "Rip down all hate, I screamed." So he's obviously angry if he's screaming, but that's like something you'd say, "Oh yeah, hate's bad, so you should rip that down." But it's not. Life is lies that life is black and white. So if you think the world is black and white, it's very easy to think of what's obviously wrong, and so therefore it's good that you're angry about it. And then uh, spoke from my skull, so that definitely kind of ties back to whatever's going on in between his ears.
Yeah, I get it. Half romantic, musketeers. So he talks about this maximalistic way of thinking that gets you riled up for a cause or idea. But then when you get smarter, you understand that it's not so simple. It's not black and white. Everybody has a reason to be who they are. Like, and
Hmm.
probably everybody doing the best they can as well.
Yeah.
And here I do feel like he's judging his earlier behavior, like he
Hmm.
comes back to it in his mind. And
Yeah. I mean, he's just saying he was so much older then. So it's like,
mhm,
that makes me think of, when people are old and they get set in their ways and you can't change their mind about things. Like
mhm,
that's what's supposed to happen at the end of your life or whatever. But
hmm.
if you're young and idealistic, you can, I don't know, it's like you're living in an echo chamber, I guess.
Because it's safer, for
Yeah.
people to be within a special bubble and to invite into your bubble like-minded individuals, so you will feel in your tribe. Let's say I have spoken about it before.
Hmm.
And I read an article about psilocybin recently, and it talked about breaking the patterns, neural passages that have been built before. It kind of dissolves it and lets a person build new neural passages as if the person is a baby. Like
Mm.
you will not use the same response as you usually would have. Let's say it works for chain smokers.
Hmm.
Usually, like it's already this passage to go light up a cigarette and smoke. It's already there. But then after those passages broke, a person could have get out of that pattern and relearn new things and new ways. Do you think he talks about that maybe? Like he's seeing the world fresh,
Yeah.
and then he comes back to his older behavior and he's kind of like, yeah, I might have been wrong there. The world is not as simple, it's not black and white.
Yeah. I mean, I think because when they do those research on the psilocybin mushrooms, they usually say it's not necessarily the mushroom itself, but it's that it facilitates some sort of a mystical experience or like a religious experience. And I think that's also something that can happen, but through other means. And I used this song on Jacob's post-Platonic podcast, and I was talking about. I used it as an example of the Apostle Paul, because he was out on the
Mhm.
road murdering people, and he was so sure that everything he was doing was right, and then he had an experience where he basically started from scratch and he had to rework everything in his life. So that's what I thought about. Oh yeah, that song really speaks to that kind of a thing. And I feel like I've had that kind of experience a lot of times. Not um not in the totality, but like my little circle of reality keeps expanding, and every time I realize, oh, I was wrong about so much. And so it's like each time I become younger, I guess you could say.
Each time you allow yourself to get out of the old pattern and go into a new experience and learn things, you will kind of by sheer will become younger. You will be
Hmm.
like the child who is learning new ways, let's say.
Yeah.
I think uh, when Saint Paul wrote his letters to Corinthians, it reminded me of Nietzsche's work, Also sprach Zarathustra, when Zarathustra came down from the mountain and started speaking the truth. He thought a lot about the truth. He had his mystical experiences high up in the mountain. He came down and he started teaching people. It was an interesting parallel. It's funny you mentioned Paul, St. Paul.
Mm.
It is, seen fresh. The mystical experience. I heard some people had a dream, which was a mystical experience. It was so enlightening that they woke up feeling that for a week, sort of, I don't know, like blessing came to them.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, do you think it can happen in reverse as well? Like
that you
like the
can
opposite
become,
of the mystical. You can become
yeah, I
dark
think so.
overnight.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, well, yeah, I think probably like traumatic experience could probably do something. It makes you cynical, it makes you more narrow-minded, because you start, if it's like looking at the next verse, he's talking about girls and jealousy and things like that. And I think, people like if you have a bad experience in romance, you tend to generalize the whole opposite sex as they're all this way or they're all that way. Um, your world becomes more narrow and your point of view. So
you can have the traumatic experience, or the opposite of this enlightening mystical experience would be a traumatic experience that would change your view of, let's say, women, or your basic trust in humanity, right? In a sense.
yeah, I think if you don't process it right, I mean, I think traumatic experience can have a positive aspect if it's put in the right context, but that's where it's either gonna, I guess it's either gonna force you to make your world bigger or smaller. And then if you have a small world full of traumatic events, it's gonna be very hard for you to grow. If your world is growing instead, then those traumatic events, you can put them in their proper place and realize it's not like that all the time and in every place. So it's kind of, I think, uh, about viewing the context of where you stand in the world.
Have you seen the movie American History X? It's with Edward
No,
Norton.
I think I did see it and I don't remember hardly any of it. I probably saw it when I was in like high school. So
it showed a traumatic experience that changed him into a teacher. So he
mm-hmm.
used to be a hardcore Nazi. Then he
Yeah.
had a very traumatic experience in jail, and he became a spokesman against. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the idea of harnessing the traumatic experience. You can make something useful for the society.
Girls' faces formed the forward path from phony jealousy to memorizing politics of ancient history, flung down by corpse evangelists, unthought of, though somehow. Ah, but I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now.
He became childlike, and he has a fresh perspective on girls' faces formed the forward path from phony jealousy. Damn, there is so much unpacking there.
I think maybe that's like the vulnerable thing, is that he's kind of maybe admitting that uh, he was speaking about like these high and mighty ideas, but then really seeing, well, some of my motivation maybe was just about romantic interests and things like that. And then memorizing politics of ancient history. Yeah, I think that's just maybe we all tend to look towards history to justify our own position, you know? Like so
I actually met a person who, when he had hard times and he wanted to find clarity, but he did not want to go into religion, so he started reading ancient philosophers and ancient
mhm,
history in order to find the roots. So he kind of needed that father teacher, but he was absolutely prejudiced against religion, so he went into that.
mhm,
That's what I thought of. It's finding the cornerstone. It's understanding who we are, memorizing politics of ancient history, or maybe even understanding what is going on right now. I still do not understand the forward path from jealousy. Uh, it's hard for me to understand that line. What does this mean, actually?
he's saying in some sense that the girls' faces were what was motivating him. That put him on the forward path. Um,
Oh,
and I don't know what he's saying phony jealousy. Like, what's the difference between phony jealousy and real jealousy? Uh,
isn't every jealousy is phony? Because like jealousy is not knowing the other person really somehow. When I know, when I trust, there is no chance for jealousy. No way.
mhm,
Everything else, where you don't know somebody, when you know only the surface, then jealousy arises somehow. There is no place for jealousy. All jealousy is phony, actually. All envy is
yeah.
phony because you don't know how much effort it took for other people to be who they are somehow. So all of that negative thing is phony, and it's hard to get out of that. I like how he's like, now I understand from the younger, fresher me perspective that that was a phony thing,
Mhm.
and path forward. Yeah, I I kind of I kind of see it like that, but I haven't seen it like that back in the day. I'd say back in the day, jealousy was based on emotion, and my emotions are correct because I can feel things, and absolutely I cannot be wrong. And that's a phony actually, because I did not understand what is actually going on. Everything was black and white. A person was wrong, I was right, and jealousy. Boom.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, jealousy is trying to force somebody else to live in your expectation of who they're supposed to be
yeah.
instead of you going and understanding um, what's going on. It makes me think too, just kind of like I don't know, where he's saying like he turned from like I don't know, I'm just picturing when somebody's not successful maybe in one area, um, that can cause jealousy. And then so you're going to find some other thing where you can kind of show off or whatever. So like it's almost like maybe I don't know. He wasn't doing so good with the girls on his own, and so then he kind of became an intellect instead, so he could um, have a chip on his shoulder or something.
Oh, interesting. It makes me think about jealousy that is sparked from insecurities. Oh,
Hmm.
that might be also a thing. Before he was knowing his own value and depth, he was prone to jealousy.
Yep.
But then with acquiring knowledge and wisdom, and let's say becoming more open-minded, broadening that thing, he understood his position in the world, and jealousy was not affecting. All jealousy became phony. Again, jealousy comes from not understanding yourself, your own value, and other people as well. Also, like, yeah, binding another person by force, let's say, is also very often comes from fear and jealousy. Interesting. That's an interesting passage, like triggered a lot of projections and memories.
Mhm.
Flung down by corpse.
Yeah, corpse evangelists. I'm guessing he's just saying like dead, dead people. I don't know, like
Mm.
because he's memorizing politics of ancient history, so he's using these long gone
Mhm.
um, thinkers as kind of the basis for justifying his own position.
Okay, can you explain to me the word flung down? What does that word mean? Expression flung down.
Like, I guess like thrown down but it's I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a kind of like casually tossed aside, maybe.
Oh, so when he was older in the past, even though he would be memorizing the politics, he actually disregarded the corpse evangelists unthought of. But now he thinks about them. Like now he's younger, so he knows better. And now he would not flunk them down.
Hmm.
It's like he
I was
becomes more humane. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking maybe it was more like well, I don't know. It's tough to say like what's flung down and how it's flung down by corpse evangelist. I think to me it sounds like you just or want to use like the way people will use the Bible or people will use some ancient text to justify themselves or to tear down, so he's flinging down or whatever he's opposed to, and he's just kind of using these dead thinkers as as tools. He's not respecting probably their whole, the whole body of their work. He's just taking the parts that he needs to make his point. Um,
Oh, but he's wiser now, right?
yeah, I don't know if there's really any part at the song where he's not. It's all looking back at his past. The only hopeful part is just saying, well, I was so much older then and I'm younger than that now. I don't know. I think,
He became a teacher. He's
yeah.
like, those were mistakes, and I know better now.
Mhm.
Excellent. I really like it. The values he shows here as well.
A self-ordained professor's tongue, too serious to fool, spouted out that liberty is just equality in school. Equality, I spoke the word, as if a wedding vow. Ah, but I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now.
Well, that is confusing.
I think he's saying he was the self-ordained professor.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, um,
Mhm.
liberty, liberty is just equality in school. Equality, I think that's something that people talk a lot about now, and there's a lot of it's this kind of obsession with fairness, like um,
Mhm.
which is really, but you're always looking at from the point of what you don't have and what somebody else does have, and that's where you're seeing inequality. Um, so that's
Yeah. It's also being used as a tool to manipulate the masses.
yeah,
It's like, okay, guys, there is inequality, and we will help you to get equality. So listen for for our message, and then people can sell basically any idea. I,
mhm,
I honestly do not believe equality is actually possible at all. We are all different. We all have different possibilities, life path, I don't know, DNA,
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
Some people can make other people reproduce themselves, create, grow a human being inside. Some people can't, but they are stronger. They can build a home. Like everybody has a function, and to equalize everybody is unnatural. But I do believe it's used as a tool.
yeah. Well, you always have to reduce people to some amount of variables where you can compare them and then point out the inequality, but you're not taking into account the totality of everything that there is. And I think, um, this is I think the lesson that some wise people have tried to say, where we're if you're always focusing on how on a sort of injustice that's about what somebody else has that you don't, you're just always going to tear others down until we all find equality in misery at the lowest possible place. Um, like because that's the only way, or when we're dead, we're all equal when we're dead, maybe you could say, you're equally dead as any other dead person.
Yeah,
But
yeah, nobody's more dead than the other dead.
yeah,
Shut out dead people. And I like how he talks, um, that he changed his mind. He was tossing that word around as this maximalistic idea without taking the
hmm,
account of nuance of reality.
yeah, well, because equality is always just a quantitative descriptor. It can only describe you can have equal quantities of things, but it doesn't say anything about what the quality is. So
Yeah,
that's why you
equally
always end
dead
up
was
with
excellent.
yeah, you always end up with equality at the bottom, not at the top, like um but
Mhm.
I think you can't put you can't put a monetary value on contentedness, but if you're content, then you don't need more. So it doesn't matter if somebody else has more if you don't need more.
Yeah, monetary value is really hard to put uh, because people have different needs, and in a desert they're willing to pay way more for water
Hmm.
than in the place of abundance. So everything, like, there is no chance of equality like that. It's like it's always depending on the level of urgency and importance at the moment, possibilities as well. Yeah, when you're content, you don't need more, basically. Hmm. I think even the idea of thriving towards equality will stop the progress.
Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, yeah, it's only, well, it always comes to that point of saying, oh, all we need to do is take from those who have a little bit more and give it to those who have a little bit less. But
Mm.
then and then what are you going to do when, people, you know, you could share all the money around equally, and then in a year, some people are going to have invested it and made money, and some people are going to spent it and squandered money. And so then, what are you going to do? You're going to do it again, and like it's not. You can't even have equality over, like, it's such a temporary thing that it could possibly
Mm-hmm.
be, because people will always be kind of moving in different directions anyway, except for when you're dead. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was deaf, that, deaf. In Poland, there is an equality kind of thing going on with money for kids. So it doesn't matter what your social status, your income, you can be a refugee as well. You can have 10 kids. So Polish government would give no, something about $110 per child, regardless of the documents, social status, anything. It's just like you have to prove that you have a child, let's say.
Hmm.
And this is sort of equality I can understand. I remember Andrew Young was proposing universal basic income as well. He was pushing for it, but like it was unrealistic to sustain. As far as I understand, the math did not add up. But it was an interesting idea, though, for the future. Something like this might work. So the governmental help can be equal to everybody, even though people aren't equal. So
Hmm.
I was thinking that might be a thing, and then people can either invest it, either like squander it, buy video games and everything. Um, just like the equality is that little tiny bit, the little, let's say, gift. It's always equal to everybody. Everybody gets the same piece of bread.
Hmm.
And then what you do with that piece of bread is your decision, and then you're free. So, what do you think about that idea?
Whenever it gets to like the economic things, we we tend to ignore the fact that things like have a real cost, like, because if it's just the government printing money, then it's just, that's kind of the problem that's happening here in the US, is inflation is starting to go out of control, because everybody's getting more money, and then everybody raises all the prices, and then there's the same amount of stuff, there's just more money to.
Mhm.
So
Everything
um
became more expensive as a consequence.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think in a lot of ways it's been a very unbalanced, more overall, it's cost people more than what they got, because they may have received some aid from the government or things like that. There's nothing that's free. So um
I'm sure there is a way, though. Like, I'm sure, just like nobody found it yet, because people who are in charge not always
I I
trying to
think I think
their best.
the only way is that people have to be willing to bear the cost. Like, if I own something, I can give it away, but um that costs me. And if I'm willing to absorb that cost, then you can have it without having to pay for it or whatever. But you know, like, that's always the cost. Sometimes there's, I think if we found all the people with too much junk and not enough room, and all the people who have real needs, we probably could do a better job of kind of sharing the wealth, but it's still, like, you see sometimes like these people who are like hoarders, and it's just because they value everything too much, and they know, like, well, I don't want to give this away, and if they try to sell it, they put the price too high, and it's just
And then they cannot get rid
so.
of it.
Yeah. And so then it doesn't really benefit them at all, but it turns into a problem. So yeah, they're all tricky situations. But I think it just has to be, well, I think people need to be generous. People can be generous. You can't have greedy people demanding that the government be generous because then you don't have any generous people to elect. So your government's just going to be full of greedy people too. So if everybody's generous, then I think a lot of those sort of plans could work. I think that's the thing. These plans that people make, they could maybe work, but we don't account for the selfishness, the fallen nature of humans. The we don't. That's what we don't account for is the human problem. So
I do believe that generosity comes in many, many forms. Humanism. I like extend it. Do not look at another person as an enemy.
in a soldier's stance, I aimed my hand at the mongrel dogs who teach, fearing not I'd become my enemy in the instant that I preach. My existence led by confusion boats, mutiny from stern to bow. Ah, but I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now.
Dogs who teach. That's
I mean,
interesting.
I think that's just him dehumanizing the people that think differently than him.
Oh,
And, he's saying, fearing not, I'd become my enemy in the instant that I preach. Like he's totally, I think it must be that something, he crosses a line at some point where he's getting up on the soapbox and he's complaining about whoever, and that's maybe where he's having his epiphany, that realizing I'm doing the exact thing that I'm criticizing these other people for doing. um so I think he's aiming his hand in a soldier's stance. He's just pointing at them very authoritatively. It's funny how he says confusion boats, but then he uses that to say mutiny from stern to bow. So that's like the whole ship, the whole thing is kind of revolting against him. He can't keep himself together. His his little plan of how he that's I think this is kind of the verse where everything's really starting to dissolve for him.
yeah. He understands now from fresh perspective, looking at himself and his action, the hypocrisy of pointing
Yeah.
fingers and saying they. I often
Hmm.
ask people like, who do you mean by they? Like, who are they? And
Yeah.
they, somebody else. They are not even human. They are not part of my tribe. And then he's like, yeah, I become my enemy. I become the thing that I actually judge. I'm doing the same
Yeah.
thing. Boats of confusion, existence led by confusion boats. Our life is like this ocean, it's unpredictable very often, and boats are the thing that those cornerstones. Boats are the thing that we build for us, our views, our personalities, our life. It's a boat that navigates through the ocean of reality for us. But he calls his boat of confusion because his boat is incorrect, right? Am I understanding it?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's saying, yeah, I mean, when he's saying my existence, like he's led by confusion, and and that confusion is kind of, he's like a house divided, a house divided against itself cannot stand. So that's what's going on. He's got this war going on inside of him, and it's not just sometimes like we'll say about like, oh, my head is fighting my heart or something like that, between your thoughts and your emotions. But he's realizing that this inconsistency is happening like everything that he's doing. So um that's just, yeah, he made a world view for himself that was total, but it was missing a lot of facts, I guess you could say, or just it didn't have the right perspective, and then the whole thing is starting to kind of crack. And yes, my guard stood hard when abstract threats, too noble to neglect, deceived me into thinking I had something to protect. Good and bad, I define these terms quite clear, no doubt, somehow. Ah, but I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now.
Hmm. So even that wisdom that he acquired, even that he wants to move away from. Like even that he's already like, I'm even above defining what's good and evil.
Yeah, I think or I mean, I think he's saying, he knows that he had a very clear definition of good and bad, and he's realizing now that he was deceived about that. Like, it's not so simple. And it makes me think of when uh, when people talk about like this meaning crisis, and that the propositional knowledge has become too much the focus. That's all the abstract thoughts and
Mm-hmm.
noble ideas and all these things. And those things aren't necessarily bad, but once you realize that they're not like the proper foundation for uh, your world, that's what he just comes to a place. He just doesn't know. Like, that's the thing. He doesn't know anything except that he doesn't know. It's
It's
like
like,
Socrates.
yeah, I learned that I know nothing. I think in here mostly he talks about virtue signaling,
Hmm.
that in his old bad days there were abstract threats too noble to neglect. It's that fighting a war against this big threat or this big threat, but all of those threats, they aren't affecting actual human being. They are there are things that will never affect your life.
Yeah.
And he used to fight those big ideas who would actually, yeah, that's interesting. I do believe he talks about virtue signaling here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that, from what I understand, the context of when he was writing it somewhat was that, he started very much as like a protest
Mm-hmm.
singer, protesting war and politics and all those things. And it's very easy to get wrapped up in a movement like that where um, you just it seems so obviously right to you. I think that's a big problem that we have now, with
Mm-hmm.
political issues, is that we have no way of knowing how, once we've committed to our position, we just can't understand how somebody else can hold the opposite view. And so we just reduce them to, they're just they're just bad people. And then what do you got to do with bad people? You just got to stop them. You can't. There's no reasoning with them, um, and I think that's where he kind of just gets stopped in his tracks, realizing that that's the way he's been acting.
Hmm.
And and he doesn't get, and it's like, I think we can know that things are good and bad, but um but we definitely do have to challenge our assumptions about those things on a regular basis. And in between, you don't know what's good and what's bad, when maybe when you have more, when your maps are made out of experience and wisdom instead of just ideas, then you can say, then you can point at something and say, well, I know that's bad and I know that's good. But
Yeah. Abstract ideas and jealousy from the surface, not understanding, boats made of misunderstanding, boats made of confusion. So he talks about knowing that he knows nothing, actually, and everything that he believed in, and he was fighting these abstract ideas and everything, are the old ways, and they are improper way of being. The correct way of being would be either to try to observe reality and understand the depth of it, or just like, yeah, have some modesty about your understanding. Just even realizing that you don't know everything. You don't know what is beneath the surface.
mm-hmm. So obviously the big thing is that this thing of saying I was older then, I'm younger now. And we would hear the reverse of that, a lot. People say, oh, I was so young then, I'm older now, I know more. And I think that if that's your view, you can look on things that way. It's like embarrassment, which is fine. We do embarrassing things when we're young, but um, but the way that he's looking at it is like a real repentance. It's a real changing of, he's kind of dismantling those walls that he built, and starting over from scratch. Um, yeah. So I think that's a good way to be, That's the way I want to be like that.
Yeah. So we are getting there, right? With years going, we get more and more young. We get younger. There, we get younger.
Mm-hmm.
People, please check out Michael's YouTube channel. I will provide the links below. Give him a follow, like, subscribe, everything.
Thank you.
Thank you for having free time. I mean it. It's an excellent song. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Thank you.
There's a famous quote by Bob Dylan: songs can't save the world. I've gone through that. He tried to save the world, but he couldn't.
Mm-hmm.